It reminded me of the message that had already been planned out about the stresses and anxieties of life. Now, you would think that once you get to a certain point in your life, regardless if it's education-wise, if I can just get that last year of high school in, or if I can get through that final class for college or whatever, that things are going to be all right, and I can put it behind me. But then another phase of life starts. And so there's always some anxieties to deal with in life, are there not? Regardless if you're at home with raising children, you remember when you were first finding out that you were expecting that first child. And you were like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Will I ever be a good dad? Or can I be the type of mom that I need to be? Or whatever the case. How would I ever be able to provide for a family? And so we realize that there's all kinds of places in life and stations of life that we can have anxieties and stress. We can have them in our workplaces from any given day. It's amazing to me that you would think that when you go to school for a number of years and you say, well, one of the things I want to do in my life, I want to become a school teacher. And I think if I can just become a school teacher, and I would love to teach other people, but also it gives me some security in my job. I kind of always know until I get ready to retire, that I can always be a school teacher. And then you find out that now you have an ending date at the end of every year. And you don't know whether what school you're going to be at next year, if you're going to be with this system or another system. And there's always stresses and anxieties to deal with. Maybe it's in your church, and you never know what's going on from one thing in somebody's life to the next thing. And people deal with varying levels of anxiety. This morning I want to talk to you about how to deal with the problem of anxiety and some ways to, biblically, for the Christian to overcome it. So maybe today you're sitting here and you said, I'm not a person who walks with Jesus. Well, I'm going to give you biblical mandates for a person who walks with Christ on how to overcome anxieties. Jesus told us that there's going to be stress and anxiety in our life, in so many words. You're going to have problems, he says. He's going to look at scriptures from Matthew 6 where it says, tomorrow's got enough worries of its own. So Jesus says you're going to have problems. You're going to have some stress in your life. You can't expend all that energy on tomorrow's problems with the energy you have today, because you know what you're going to do with today? You're going to ruin today. Let me tell you what anxiety really is. Anxiety, from a clinical definition, I broke out my counseling books, by the way. Anxiety, from a clinical definition, in a nutshell, is this. It is worry and fear over future or anticipated events, whether real or imagined. If you got an ache or a pain and you decide, well, it won't go away, I guess I need to go to the doctor. And automatically you begin to think that maybe, just maybe, it's a tumor or a major medical issue. Is it something that's going to be life-threatening? And so you worry. Maybe you've had a little pain in your chest. Anxiety can cause pain in your chest, almost symptomatic of a heart attack. And you get to thinking that you're going to have a heart attack. And they said, you know what? It's only stress. And we say, whew, at least it was only stress. Well, that's not a good thing. If you go to the doctor and they tell you that your arrhythmic heart rate or whatever the case is, or the pains that you're feeling in your chest is due to stress, well, guess what's happening? Your body is trying to tell you that you need to try to alleviate some of this anxiety and stress, because it may turn into a heart attack or stroke. And so when we finally get a relief that it's nothing wrong physically, then we have to deal with the emotional, maybe the spiritual aspect of anxiety. One man said this. He said, worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it don't ever get you anywhere. Unless you were along my granddaddy's front porch, when my Papa West, he had rocking chairs all the time on his front porch, and they were the type that walked. You know what I'm talking about? He tell you, now you youngins don't rock them chairs so hard because they'll walk off the porch. I'm like, now, I never quite figured out how a rocking chair would walk, but it just in rocking it would, how hard you did, it would gradually slide along. And so we had a walking chair. Let me just give you a couple of ways this morning. First of all, understand the problem. As we said, anxiety is a distress about future uncertainties, no matter what it may be. Regardless if it's family issues, whether it's work issues, whatever it could be. It's a distress about future uncertainties. And it causes mental agitation and uneasiness. And they could be mild or severe. And anxiety is not good to deal with. We've all had to deal with it at some point in time. I remember when I was in Bible college and I was finishing up my senior year, and Amy and I were both finishing up, and we were getting through all these final exams. And you study for this exam, you study for that exam, you study for that exam, you're getting ready for whatever you got to do. Send in all these final projects and term papers, and you finally get it all submitted, and you walk out of the classroom, and I remember the day very vividly as I'm standing there on the corner of the street there, on Poindexter Street, right beside of the college. And I said, all right, now what else do I need to do? Because I'm so hyped up. Amy said I would get like, you know. Could y'all believe I would get, But I do that sometimes. And so, and I walk out, and I'm just standing there. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? Because I'd done it all. I had gotten it all behind me. And then there was the anxiety of what's next. And you know how it is sometimes in your life of whatever the anxiety of what's next is coming. You see, anxiety has to deal with fears about the future. Now, it could be brought on because of a traumatic event in your past, but anxiety primarily deals with about the future. If your house has ever been broken into, every time you hear a bump in the night, you may say, is somebody breaking in my house? If you've gotten that phone call in the middle of the night to let you know that a loved one has died, and the phone rings in the middle of the night, you go, who's died? You see, it could be brought on because of something that's happened in the past, but typically it's a worry about the future and the uncertainties of everything that takes place. That's what causes anxiety. 3 main things that cause anxiety this morning. Insecurity. Something bad is going to happen. It's going to happen. We just automatically tell ourselves something bad is going to happen. And typically we put more worry about the events and how bad they are than not as much as what really does take place. There's helplessness. There's nothing I can do about it. If something bad happens, there's nothing I can do. And then there's the feeling of isolation. There's no one can help me. That's the reason we feel so terrible in our periods of anxiety. I'm in it all by myself. Nobody can help me. And so emotionally it causes much anxiety. It's something that could be imagined in your mind. It's something that really had taken place. Because what if? You ever heard that? What if? And so this morning I want to help you with some of that. So as we understood the problem, now let's look at ways to overcome the problem. First of all, if I'm talking to believers this morning, people, the reason you're here this morning, you believe in Jesus to some level or degree. You're not here this morning and say, I'm just an atheist, I just want to show up just so I can say there was an atheist in church on Sunday. There's a reason why you're here this morning. You believe in God. And so I'm talking to Christian people this morning, how Christian people can overcome anxiety in your life. I think some of the things that you deal with in life are because we're not fully trusting in God. We all deal with them. Jesus is going to look at that in just a second. So the best remedy to deal with the problem is we got to deal with the problem, not just its symptoms. And a lot of times, everything that you do in life, we always try to address something. I got a stuffy nose, or I got a runny nose, or whatever. And we go to the drugstore. Have you got a stuffy nose or a runny nose? We got a pill for that. If you got a stuffy nose, we'll give you something to make it run. If you got a runny nose, we'll give you something to stop it up. We need to know what your symptom is so we can treat it. But is it really helping the cause? So we need to get at the root of the cause of our anxiety. The truth about it is insecurity, helplessness, and isolation, it all hurts. And so I want to deal with it from a Christian perspective. When the Christian may feel insecure, the reality is that he is very secure if you follow Christ. Scripture tells us in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 21 through 25, my son, preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let them out of your sight. You know, a lot of time when we get ourselves in a bind and we get anxious over something, it's because we just let things slip by us before we realize what took place. Made a poor judgment call. You ever bought a car and you said, man, I wish I'd never bought that thing. That's the worst vehicle I ever bought in my life. It's the most impractical thing that I've ever owned. You know? Why did I rent this house? If I had just gotten that house, I could have saved a couple $100 a month, and that would have paid my utility bill as well. And so we begin to make not sound judgment. So he says here, Proverbs chapter 3, my son, preserve sound judgment and discernment, and do not let them out of your sight. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. Then you will go on your way in safety. You know, what did we talk about anxiety? It's those threats, those real or imagined threats that could take place in our life. We need safety. That's the only thing that helps us in our anxiety. If you've ever had a panic attack, you know, you're just looking for a way to get out of whatever event that's taking place in your life so that you feel safe. And he says this, he says, then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have you ever lost sleep at night because of your anxiety and your stress? You better believe you have, because I've done it at times. Have no fear of sudden disaster or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked, but the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being snared. You have to trust in God. Scripture reminds us. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to what? Help us in our time of need. Notice the words that are coming out here in Proverbs 3:25. We need confidence. We're not confident about things, so we worry and we fret over things that we have no control over. He says that we need to approach the throne of God's grace with what? Confidence. You need to be confident. He's there. He's going to respond. He's going to show up. His grace is going to be there when I need it the most. And while the Christian may feel helpless at times, the reality is that there's great help for him. Romans 8, chapter 3, verse 21. Romans 8, 31, excuse me. Romans 8, chapter 3, verse 21. Yeah, Romans 8, 31. What then shall we say in response to this? If God is for us, who can be against us? It comes down to faith then, doesn't it? Who do we trust? Who do you trust in? Psalm chapter 23, verse 4. Sometimes the Christian may feel isolated. Realize that God is right there with you. What does he say? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I've got somebody protecting me, so I can take comfort in that. That's what he said. Rod and staff, that's what it was for, was it not? Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5 and 6. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content. Remember we talked about contentment last week? And how discontentment causes anxieties and problems and stress and you name it. And here he says keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. He's right there. You're never going to be isolated. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? We fear man more than we do God a lot of times. The remedy for anxiety is complete trust and confidence in the Lord. Isaiah says this, chapter 40, verse 31. But for those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. And they will run and not grow weary. And they will walk and not grow faint. You know, in anxiety, a lot of times when you're stressing out, you just don't have any more energy. You just can't go any further. But when you have hope in the Lord, He renews you. He strengthens you. He picks you up. You soar through life. Doesn't mean you're not going to have issues. We're going to see that. John chapter 14, verse 1, Jesus says, do not let your heart be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me.